A jury in the US has convicted a right-wing militia leader of seditious conspiracy over an attempt to overturn Joe Biden's victory in the 2020 presidential election. Stuart Rhodes and one other member of the Oath Keepers were found guilty of plotting to use force at the Capitol building to stop Congress certifying the election result. Rhodes, who prosecutors say acted as a battlefield general during the riots, was also found guilty of tampering with documents and proceedings. He was acquitted of 2 other counts of conspiracy.
If you look at these charges, there were many charges leveled against our client, Mr. Rhodes, and all the other clients. I assume that some of the other lawyers will talk to you about their clients, but we certainly are thankful for the not guilty verdicts that Mr. Rhodes received. We're disappointed with the guilty verdict. We feel like that we presented a case which showed through evidence and testimony that Mr. Rhodes did not commit the crime of seditious conspiracy. There was no evidence introduced to indicate that there was a plan to attack the Capitol.
It goes without question, we're disappointed. Out of 25 total counts, there were 11 guilty verdicts, so that's, batting above the Mendoza line, certainly.
The US Senate has passed a bill that aims to protect same-sex marriage amid concerns the Supreme Court could seek to overturn a 2015 ruling that legalized it nationwide. 61 lawmakers voted in favor of the bill, while only 36 opposed it. Campaigners have considered same-sex marriage to be under threat since the conservative-led Supreme Court struck down the rights to an abortion in June. The bill also protects interracial marriages. It will now return to the House of Representatives, which is expected to approve it in the next few weeks.
In many ways, the story of America has been a difficult but inexorable march towards greater equality. Sometimes we've taken steps forward. Other times, unfortunately, we've taken disturbing steps backward. But today, after months of hard work, after many rounds of bipartisan talks, and after many doubts that we could even reach this point, we are taking the momentous step forward for greater justice for LGBTQ Americans.
Well, for more on all those stories, let's cross live to Washington and speak to Arise's US correspondent, Eric Ham. Good to see you. Eric, let's start with that conviction of the right-wing militia leader by a jury in the US of seditious conspiracy over an attempt to overturn Joe Biden's victory in the 2020 presidential election. Just what is seditious conspiracy? I understand it's very unusual to bring a charge like that. So in that respect, something of a landmark case.
Oh, very much indeed, Charles, it is. In fact, what seditious conspiracy means is it was a conspiracy to overthrow the government, to destroy the country. And this is a law, Charles, that has been on the books that has not been used in more than 150 years. So that gives you just some understanding of how rare it is to have a charge like this brought against someone. And so what we are seeing here is not only was the leader of the Oath Keepers found guilty of this, but we do know that one of the other offenders in this case was also convicted of that. Now, the other serious charges, there were a total of 5 other more serious charges that they were not convicted of. But what these 2 charges will guarantee is that they will spend a potential maximum of 20 years in prison. We are expecting the judge to actually make a decision, a verdict, in this case in about 90 days. And so we are still waiting to see how much time these individuals will receive. But what we saw here in this case, Charles, was now this was like the test case for a very serious charge, for a charge that had never been brought again in more than 100 years. And what we are now learning is both the Department of Justice and the January 6th Congressional Investigation Committee, they are both pleased with these charges against these individuals because these, many believe, were some of the signature culprits of actually organizing and orchestrating that insurrection that took place on January 6th, 2021.
And just tell us a little bit about the Oath Keepers, Eric. I mean, they sort of see the far left as the enemy, don't they? And trying to impose a sort of socialist takeover of the country, with the incoming Biden administration key to those efforts.
Yeah, and Charles, this is not just an organization that sees the far left as the enemy. This is an organization that has banded together with other white supremacy organizations. They have actually been deemed a terrorist and hate-filled organization by the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the United States top law enforcement agency. And this is an organization that was working very closely with the Trump administration, the Trump campaign. We do know that the leader of this organization that has been found guilty of this most serious charge is someone who was in contact with the Biden administration, with the Trump administration in this instance. And what we are seeing here is this is what many believe to be one of the first dominoes that they believe they need to fall in order to actually cast a wider net going after many others who they believed were involved in January 6th. Some believe it could now be getting closer and closer to former President Donald Trump's doorstep.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Briefly, do trials like this have an impact, if not legally, then politically, on Donald Trump, or is that anybody's guess?
No, Charles, this is a very serious charge. And again, this was not only was this the most serious charge that was leveled in all of these cases, but this was seen as the test case for how far and how likely it is for the government to continue its efforts to go after those who believe orchestrated the events that took place on January 6th. And so now, both, as I said, given the fact that the Department of Justice and the January 6th committee believe that this case was victorious, they believe that they now have the evidence and the tools that they need to go even further. What the question that still remains, however, is will they actually go after Donald Trump himself?
Briefly, Eric, we hear that the Democrats are voting on their next House leader, and that looks set to be Hakeem Jeffries, who will be the first person of color to lead a party in either chamber.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, what we're seeing is a passing of the torch, and it's actually interesting because it's moving much smoother for Democrats than it is for Republicans. Already, we know that Hakeem Jeffries will be the first person of color of any party to lead the House Democratic Caucus. He is running unopposed, which shows you just how much support he has within the caucus. And he will be the first one. And he is ushering a new team that will look to be made up of people of color as well as women as well. So what we're seeing here is not only a new era, but also a new moment taking place in the United States, where not only is Washington beginning to look more and more like America, but so are those who are actually in charge.
Eric, thanks very much indeed. Eric Ham, Arise US correspondent, talking to me there from Washington.